Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I have previously ranked the common, uncommon, legendary, and void items in Risk of Rain 2, but those were chump change. Each of them were only about 30 items per video, but for today, we'll be putting those in the dirt. Today, I will be ranking all 107 abilities of the various survivors in Risk of Rain 2. It doesn't feel good to say. I'm not thrilled about how much this script reading is going to take out of me, but I'll survive. Now, if you go to the ROR2 wiki right now and count every ability one by one, you'll find that there are actually more than 107 in the game. However, some of these abilities aren't really their own thing, and are only seen by activating another ability. The biggest example of this is how Railgunner's gun technically is like 5 different abilities in itself, however in reality you can only see those after activating things like her Cryo Charge or Sniper Scope. These abilities, Void Fiend's passive, Captain's Beacon, though the individual beacons will be ranked, and a few others will not be included in this ranking. Don't worry about it, you probably wouldn't even notice them gone if I didn't say anything. Anyways, this intro is already too long, so I'm going to wrap it up with a heavy reminder that I am not a professional at this game. These ability rankings will be much more heavily affected by how fun they are compared to how applicable they are in something like Eclipse. And with that over with, please consider subscribing. This video took a lot out of me, and it will help me get out more of them in the future. Being the worst in something is very sad, but being the worst in a group of 107 things is honestly just impressive. So which ability achieved this feat? That would go to Captain's Resupply Beacon. I have just under 1,000 hours in this game, and I honestly do not know what this thing does. In this ranking, I plan to rank everything in as much of a vacuum as I can, but I also want to be able to compare the abilities to their alternative options. Compared to the healing, shocking, and hacking beacon, this ability is practically useless. 106 is Acrid's Blight. This is another case of being completely overshadowed by the other option. Blight is apparently always worse than Poison, and it's almost pathetic. I feel bad for it, honestly, because it's everyone's favorite ability to make fun of, but alas, here we are. 105 goes to the Power Taser on Captain. Captain is having a tough time on this list already, but I mean, I still stand by my rankings. This ability does have its rare uses, but its damage is pathetic, and the stun grenade does its job far better. It can save you every now and then, but I don't know, it's just very disappointing, and we don't have anything else to use, so. 104 is Heretic's Nevermore. Yeah, that's right, I bet you didn't even think this was gonna be on this list, but it is. And to those of you who figured it would be, I bet you're surprised that this ability that literally does nothing isn't last. I would genuinely rather have nothing than any of the previous 3 abilities. 103 is Rex's Bramble Volley. Both of Rex's utility options are a bit weird and awkward to use, but at least the other one doesn't do damage to you. With Rex, I find that it's best to balance having abilities that do self-damage and ones that don't, so that you don't hurt yourself too much. And 9 out of 10 times when you use Rex's ability, you are going to want to not be taking any damage in the process. 102 is Void Fiend's uncorrupted version of his Trespass ability. This ability almost always does damage to you. Oftentimes when you use it, you accidentally take fall damage, and it's never fun. I am aware that this is intentional so that you can put some points towards your corruption meter in a pinch, but outside of that, it hurts more than it helps. It's also just weird to use, and I find I'm not able to get to things I think I can with this ability. 101 is another Void Fiend ability, and is the corrupted version of his Suppress ability. This ability allows you to take some damage in order to keep your corruption for longer, however that's all it does. If you want to have your corruption more often, then it's much better to just pick up some void items and lower the threshold that way, than risk harming yourself enough to put yourself in any danger. Also, with the Uncorrupted Suppress healing you and being a genuinely good ability, I find myself accidentally hurting myself with the corrupted version just due to muscle memory. 100th place goes to Artificer's Plasma Bolt. This ability is like Acrid's Blight in that it is objectively worse than the alternative. The only technical advantage over Flame Bolt is that its area of effect is larger, but it does far less damage and reloads in the same amount of time. It is just never worth taking, but it doesn't get last in this list because it technically doesn't harm you like the previous ones have. 99th is Railgunner's passive Magnetic Accelerator. For those of you who don't know, this turns all of your critical chance into critical damage, and in the interest of ranking these within a vacuum, I have to put this lower, as it only helps Railgunner and would likely be worse on all of the other characters. Number 98 goes to Engineer's Bubble Shield. For this one, I have a feeling that the Eclipse nerds will come at me in the comments for some weird mechanic I didn't remember that for some reason makes this S tier, but I don't really care. For the rest of us normal people, this ability is really small and very difficult to play around with, so for that reason, it is placed pretty low on this list. 97th goes to Commando's Frag Grenade. I don't care if this thing can proc bans, I don't care. Y'all know how I feel about this ability. 9 out of 10 times when you use it, it hits nothing or rolls awkwardly off the terrain to the middle of nowhere. If this grenade exploded on impact, I might like it a bit more, but for now, I hate it with a burning passion. 96th is Bandit's Blast. This is the alternative option from his shotgun, and it's underwhelming. Most fights you get in, you won't need this much range anyways, and Bandit's shotgun doesn't even have that much spread. Overall, it's just worse than the burst, but it's not useless, so for that reason, it's getting 96th. 95 is Railgunner's Polar Field Device. This ability is bad. If it froze enemies instead of just slowing them, I would like it a lot more, but other than its synergy with the death mark, it's just bad all over. Also, taking this ability means you have no movement ability as Railgunner anymore, so there's that too. 94 is another case of an ability that is almost always worse than its alternative, and is Commando's Tactical Dive. This ability is just awkward and disappointing. The slide does everything this does and more, and while this can act as a way to stop fall damage, it doesn't do that as well as the slide. 93rd goes to Rex's Directive Harvest ability. This item isn't bad, but it's just very hard to play around. It is very complicated in how it works, and even after it activates, you have to go collect the orbs it drops. A lot of Rex's kit revolves around having healing whenever you want it, and this just makes it harder. Number 92 is Multi's Scrap Launcher. I honestly don't even know how to feel with this one, but I know that I don't like it very much. In a world with the nail gun and rebar puncher, this ability is pretty terrible. It's too low range, the damage isn't very good, and overall I would just prefer any of the other primary options. 91st is Engineer's Bouncing Grenades Primary. I'm honestly surprised that I didn't rank this lower, as it is the most awkward primary ability to use, but it has no better alternative. It's what we have to live with, and I guess I'm gonna have to be okay with that. It's not terrible in the damage department, but other than that, it's hard to aim, punishing to use, and slow even after getting attack speed. 90 is the alternative to Rex's Bramble Volley, Directive Disperse. This suffers the same fate as Engineer's primary, in that it's not very good, however, because it's the only option we have, it's fine. Having to turn the opposite direction of the way you want to go just to use this ability is awkward, and it would be far better if it propelled you forward instead. 98 is Acrid's Ravenous Bite. I mean, is anyone surprised this ranked this low? Melee Acrid is one of the classic meme builds, and this ability is its centerpiece. The ranged alternative is basically always better and more versatile than this, and so for that reason, it gets 89th place. 88th goes to Engineer's Pressure Mines. I feel like I'm kinda beating up Engineer here, but whatever. This ability is inconsistent, and it will often go off before it has the chance to prime, and if it does prime, enemies will probably just walk around it. It does have a higher damage potential than the Spider Mines, but you rarely get that. 87th is Mercenary's passive, Cybernetic Enhancements. All this does, for those of you who are not aware, is give him a double jump, which I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's an item that does this already. There's no downside, so I can't in good conscience put it any lower, but this is all it's getting. 86 is Heretic's Secondary, Slicing Maelstrom. This ability has some huge damage potential, but is unfortunately really hard to use. Unless you're fighting a stationary enemy, it is hard to get the full value out of, which sucks, and half the time it misses anyways. You either throw it too far or too short, and it's just no fun. 85 is the Grapple Fist on Loader. This ability is pretty good, but to be honest, I mean, you know what I'm gonna say. The Spiked Fist is always better, and you will never be in a situation in which you would rather use a Wisp as a grapple point rather than just kill it. Doing 0 damage makes this ability pretty bad, so 85th is where it stays. 84th is Railgunner's only movement ability, the Concussion Device. This is a very interesting and dynamic movement ability, and it can also be used offensively to get enemies away from you, but other than that, it's a bit awkward to use and just isn't very useful compared to most of the other movement abilities. 83rd is where Huntress finally shows up on this list. Her baseline blink is just bad. You will almost never need the full distance that this gives you, and while it's nice to be able to teleport upwards, the punishing cooldown combined with the fact that its alternative has 3 charges is what makes it almost never worth taking. 82 is Void Fiend's Uncorrupted Suppress. There isn't much to say about this one, to be honest. While having on-call healing is nice, it's better to be in your corrupted state on Void Fiend, so just taking a bite out of your corruption meter every time you use this kind of makes it annoying. It's not exactly bad, but just meh. And getting some healing items will take its job pretty quickly. 81 is Acrid's Frenzied Leap. This is just his base utility, but with extra unnecessary steps that make it weird. The cooldown, while having the ability to shorten it, is very punishing, and using this kinda makes it so that you can't use the ability when out of combat. 81 is honestly pretty generous for this one, if I'm gonna be real. 80th. Jesus Christ, it's just now hitting me that I have to write 79 more of these paragraphs, but I suppose I did this to myself. 80th is Railgunner's Supercharge. This ability would be so good, but the fact that it removes all of your abilities after using it for a short time makes it not worth using most times. You need to have the ability to get out of dodge when using this, or else you're going to find yourself in some very punishing situations. 79 is Mercenary's Rising Thunder. I have always said that I don't really like the feel of Mercenary when I play him, and this ability is one of the biggest culprits. It's awkward, misses half the times you use it, and is only marginally better in damage than its alternative option. Maybe it's good for gaining verticality, but it's not like Mercenary ever struggled with that. 78th is Rex's passive, Natural Toxin. I honestly didn't even know he had a passive until making this video, but apparently he does. All it does is make some of his attacks weaken enemies, but hey, that's not bad. Other than that though, it's not that helpful, so I can't really put this higher, but I wouldn't hate having this on some other characters like Commando. 77 is Railgunner's alternative special ability, the Cryo Charge. This option might do less damage than the Supercharge and have the same cooldown, but the fact that it freezes enemies helps its ranking a little bit. Because it freezes enemies, you can both execute them and also have a little extra time to run away as your abilities come back. Other than that though, it's still not very good. 76 is Multi's Power Saw. I find that a lot of people hate on this primary, but I don't know, I kinda like it. The speed boost you get when hitting an enemy to keep you attacking them is very nice, and the damage isn't terrible. I know Multi isn't exactly made for melee range, but nonetheless, the fun factor of this ability earned it a higher ranking than the Scrap Launcher. 75th goes to Artificer's Flamethrower. Another one here that the Eclipse nerds will probably hate me for, but I don't care. This ability takes too long to activate, removes your ability to sprint while you use it, and also gets rid of all mobility you could have had. Also, I know the damage is very good, but it's not very easy to get as much value out of it as you could. 74 is Mercenary's other secondary, Whirlwind. This ability is another awkward one that just kind of throws you off sometimes. The damage isn't bad, but it stops you from sprinting, and that kind of makes it feel very bad. I am only putting this higher since it's better than Rising Thunder, and kinda satisfying to use sometimes, but other than that, it doesn't really have a lot going for it. 73rd is going to Loader's Thunder Slam. I'm not really sure how, but this ability somehow never does what I want it to do. It either misses entirely, or doesn't do any damage, and I just don't like it very much. The Head Stompers kinda does its job anyways, and because of that, I find myself almost never running this ability. 72 is Rex's primary, Directive Inject. I like this one, but somehow whenever I use it, it kind of feels like it does nothing. The damage is a bit pathetic, and while the last shot of the burst heals you and weakens the enemies, it feels a bit underwhelming most of the time. 71st is Commando's base secondary, the phase round. This ability is weird, and kinda has the same issues as Rex's primary, in that it feels like it does nothing whenever I use it. I'm aware that you're encouraged to pierce it through as many enemies as possible, but that is easier said than done, and the damage you get from the phase blast is just better. 70 is Rex's Seed Barrage. This ability hurts you whenever you use it, but it's honestly kinda worth it. It does have some pretty serious damage, but for some reason I just prefer to use the alternative secondary if given the chance. This one I am pretty sure is one of the rankings that is most affected by personal preference, so sorry if anyone doesn't like it being this low. 69th is Artificer's Snap Freeze. This ability is good in the Mithrix fight, but other than that, it feels pretty weird to use. I don't like that it's your only option for a utility on Artificer, and I would far prefer if we had anything else. Because it is our only choice, and honestly isn't that bad, I'm placing it here and no higher. 68 is Huntress's base primary, Strafe. I don't even know what I don't like about this ability, since there's nothing really wrong with it. It does less potential damage than Flurry, so I guess that might be it, but I feel like it might be something about how it feels to use that I don't like. Either way, I never really use it anymore, and for that reason, it's getting 68th. 67th is Heretic's primary, Hungering Gaze. This ability is really interesting and satisfying to use, however the cooldown on it, similar to Artificer's, is kind of annoying. The ability to stack Heretic's abilities is cool and all, but most of them aren't really worth it, and this one is one of the worst offenders in that regard, having its cooldown get increasingly longer as you get more stacks. Overall, I think this may be the beginning in the ranking of all the abilities after this one being ones I generally like. 66th is Commando's primary, Double Tap. Is it weak? Yeah. Is it a bit boring? I guess. Even with these things, I still like it a lot. There is something nice about having a simple ability with no weird quirks that I like a lot about this, even if it is objectively one of the worst primary abilities. You can't really argue with a proc coefficient of 1 though, because that helps a lot in the later levels. 65th is our 4th primary in a row, which is a complete coincidence by the way, and is Void Fiend's Uncorrupted Drown. This ability is pretty sweet. It's what Commando's Double Tap wishes it was, and not only does it do more damage, it also slows enemies and has aim assist. Other than those things though, I don't really want to put it higher because it's a bit boring and also a bit slow. 64th goes to Captain's Healing Beacon. I feel like this ability doesn't belong this high in the ranking, but it has saved me more than I'd like to admit. It's worse than the other 2 beacons yet to be mentioned, but it can kinda help sometimes, I suppose. The fact you have to be in its radius makes it a bit weird and situational though, so whatever. 63rd is Railgunner's signature ability, her M99 Sniper Scope. I really want to like this ability, but it feels weird. It is difficult to use, and the zoom of the scope is a bit disorienting. I like how the weak point system works though, even if they are kinda tough to hit, but I hate the reload mechanic, so for that reason, about halfway in the ranking is good enough for me. 62 is Commando's Tactical Slide. I like this ability, and it is far better than the dive, but after playing Huntress once and having a teleport, using this feels a bit underwhelming. I like how it does different things if you're mid-air or not though, so that's a plus. Like most of Commando's abilities, it's a bit bland. 61 goes to Void Fiend's Uncorrupted Secondary, Flood. This is another ability I desperately want to like, but I find it a bit unwieldy to use and inconsistent. You have to charge it up to get any real value out of it, so for that reason I can't rank it any higher than this. 60th goes to Rex's Directive Drill. This is the better secondary option in my opinion, and to be honest, it kinda shreds. If an enemy is in the radius for the whole duration of this ability, they take 1440% damage, which is no laughing matter for a simple secondary ability. Its cooldown is a bit long though, though, and sometimes it hits nothing at all, so whatever, I suppose. 59th is Heretic's strangest ability, Ruin. The only reason this ability isn't ranked any higher is because the Ruin debuff runs out too quickly. If it lasted longer and you were able to stack it more often, this would be so much more fun to use, and I want that so bad. Alas, this is what we have, so this is where it stays. Engineer's Walking Turret, which I will not bother using the actual name for, is number 58. This item honestly isn't as bad as some people say. Its damage isn't very good compared to the stationary turrets, but it works better if you want your turrets to be with you, I guess. It allows Engineer to use Wungus, if nothing else. 57 is Huntress's Arrow Rain. I feel bad for putting this ability as low as I did. I like it a lot, and I actually prefer it over Ballista. However, I recognize that it's not really as good as Ballista. The damage on it is pretty great, but you need an enemy to stay in the radius for a decent amount of time to get that, and they likely won't do that. In 56th place is Rex's Tangling Growth. This item is an on-call Tentabobble, and for that, I love it. This ability can calm the chaos of a teleporter fight pretty well on its own. I far prefer it over its alternative, as it heals you without having to do anything, and while it does do some self-damage, its cooldown makes it so that isn't really a problem. 55th is Engineer's Spider Mines. I don't have a lot to say about this one. To be honest, neither of Engineer's secondaries really feel like they fit into his kit all that well. I like the Spider Mines when ranking them in a vacuum though, and it's funny to see them skitter after enemies, and their damage isn't that bad. Number 54 is, finally, Captain's Diablo Strike. I know the pros of this game don't like it, and I'll be honest, I don't love using it either, but there is one very important thing that allows it to be almost ranked in the top half, and that is, it's funny. It isn't even that bad, to be honest. The damage is ridiculous, and if you can work around it, it's usually pretty worth it. Top half is finally here, and let me tell you, I am tired of writing this script. 53 is brought to you by Bandit's Lights Out. Another one here that I feel probably shouldn't be this high, however, I can't really place it lower as it's pretty helpful in a pinch. It's completely useless compared to Desperado, but it's nice to chain the shots together on a group of enemies. 52 goes to Loader's Charged Gauntlet. I feel like I am the only person who prefers Thunder Gauntlet over this one for some reason, but it is mainly because of the super long charge up time. It makes what is otherwise a very mobile character slow down, and it has gotten me killed a few times. Maybe it's a skill issue though. I don't know. It probably is. 51st and 50th can't really be ranked separately, to be honest. Bandit's Serrated Shiv and Serrated Dagger are one of the only cases in which it is entirely up to you on which you prefer to use. The Shiv is getting 51st since it does less damage, but other than that, it's completely up to you if you want range and less damage, or melee and more damage. 49th brings us into the top 50 and is Multi's Transport Mode. This ability is very funny, and it's a very fun experience to slam into enemies for a ton of damage. It can be a bit hard to control at times though, so I'm not gonna rank it any higher. 48 is Mercenary's Primary, Laser Sword. I would honestly put this higher if the last slice didn't exist. It may be better and applies exposed to enemies, but because it has a longer cooldown than the other two swipes, it feels pretty weird to use. Its damage is pretty sweet though, so 48 that is. Number 47 is Mercenary's Blinding Assault. Another ability I want to like a lot more. Unfortunately, its damage is a bit pathetic. I am aware of the glitch that allows you to push enemies into the ground, but I don't think I'm going to include that in the ranking since it's a glitch. I like how it works similar to Bandit's Lights Out. However, this also means it's worse when there's not an enemy near. 46th is Railgunner's Primary, Smart Rounds. This ability is pretty chill with nothing too special about it except for one very important aspect. It has just a little bit of recoil, so in the late game, when you have a bunch of attack speed, you can use this ability to literally fly, and that is hilarious. It's honestly super interesting too, since you can lessen fall damage and allow you to move around the map decently quickly. Number 45 is Railgunner's alternative sniper scope, the M99 Marksman. This ability might not do as much damage as the sniper, but I don't care, because all the downsides of the sniper are completely taken away. The scope is not as awkward to use, and there's no stupid reload mechanic to fumble with after every shot. Number 44 goes to Commando's superior secondary ability, Phase Blast. This ability is a bit ridiculous in its damage, and it's very useful in chunking an enemy's health bar down. It doesn't proc bans since it's a shotgun, but it's still very nice to use, and I prefer it over Phase Round any day. Its range isn't even that bad, to be honest, and I find myself killing things from farther away than I expected I could. 43 is the Rebar Puncher on multi. I don't like this ability on its own, but paired with his retool ability, you can bypass the cooldown of the attack and spam the hell out of this ability, making it pretty fun to use. Without that though, this item does good damage but is super slow and uncomfortable to use, so 43rd it is. 42 is Bandit's good primary, Burst. I like this, however I don't love the reloading mechanic it has. I would much prefer if this ability had a lower fire rate but no reloading aspect, as it feels awkward sometimes. Not much more to say about it though, to be honest, so let's just move on. 41 is Loader's Pylon. Am I the only one who feels like this ability doesn't fit into Loader's kit at all? Like, it would make a lot more sense to be on Engineer, but whatever. Regardless, I still like it. It helps Loader proc things and have some amount of crowd control while she focuses on a boss or something. The damage is a bit pathetic, but it's not really the point, so whatever. 40th is Captain's Shocking Beacon. This ability is everything Loader's Pylon wishes it could be. Its ability to keep a bunch of smaller enemies perma-stunned is super helpful when dealing with the chaos of a teleporter fight. The only downside is that you can only have up to 2 without lysate cells, and for that I can't rank it any higher. 39 is the corrupted version of Void Fiend's secondary, Flood. This is the uncorrupted version without the downside of having to charge it first. I get why it's sentenced to being corrupted only because it is very strong and can one-shot most squishy enemies. The damage is ridiculous, its area of effect is huge, and it's really easy to hit. Number 38 is Bandit's Desperado. This ability stacks pretty slowly, however it technically has an infinite damage cap, and if you are diligent enough and put in the effort, you can get its damage to be very high. This would honestly be super fun if your Desperado stacks didn't reset between levels, as you could one-shot Mithrix very consistently. I might actually play Bandit if that were the case. 37th is Loader's Primary, Knuckle Boom. This is what I want Mercenary's Primary to be. It feels good to use this primary ability, and it's super satisfying to hit a group of enemies with it. Only reason it's not higher is because it's still a melee, and that causes some issues sometimes when you don't want to be close to any of the enemies. 36 is Acrid's Primary, Vicious Wounds, which is another ability I wish Mercenary's Primary was. It's very similar to Laser Sword, but I think the healing aspect is a little bit more useful. And also, I find it more satisfying to use. I really feel like I'm tearing through the enemies with this ability, and that's super fun. 35th is the Blast Canister on multi. This is multi's only secondary option, but I honestly don't hate that. This does so much damage for being an item intended to stun enemies, and also procs things really well. Multi's crowd control has never been his specialty, so this ability carries him in that regard. Number 34 is Commando's Suppressive Fire. I know y'all might disagree with it being this high, but I don't really care. The aspect of this ability that makes it so that it fires more bullets when your attack speed is higher makes it really strong sometimes. Combined with its ability to stun, this is one of Commando's strongest abilities and is infinitely better than its alternative, which is the Frag Grenade. In 33rd place is Commando's Orbital Strike. This is Captain's best combat ability because its damage is actually unhinged sometimes. It procs bans and also does a ton of damage on its own. Obviously it's less than the Diablo Strike, but it's still enough that it allows you to destroy most enemies pretty easily. 32 is Bandit's Smoke Bomb. This ability is pretty nice, and what I consider to be one of Bandit's best. It is the only way that I'm aware of, other than the Spectral Circlet, to make yourself invisible in the game, and that is very helpful. Not only that, but it doubles as a double jump and a stun, and does a bit of damages too. Overall, It's just a really great movement ability. 31st is Artificer's Ion Surge. This ability is one of, if not the best, escapability in the entire game, especially on a character like Artificer, who doesn't have any other movement. Its damage is pretty good for being a movement ability, and it sends you ridiculously high. Unfortunately, since it is made for Artificer to be paired with her passive, I can't rank it any higher, as it wouldn't be that helpful on other characters. Top 30 begins with Artificer's passive, the ENV suit. Is it supposed to be the Envy suit, by the way? I don't know. This ability is another that would be incredibly useful on other characters. Imagine floating above everyone with Railgunner. It would finally make her playable. Other than having slow fall though, it doesn't add anything else, so I'm not ranking it any higher than this. 29 is Multi's best primary option, the Auto Nailgun. This ability is the definition of proc heaven, and can shred enemies even without items to back it up. I like the added shotgun blast when you stop firing, and paired with his power mode ability, this is one of the best primary abilities in the game. Number 28 is Artificer's better primary, the Flame Bolt. The damage you get out of this simple primary ability honestly feels like cheating sometimes. Paired with the Ignition Tank, and it becomes probably the best primary in the game, as its damage is ridiculous. 27th place is the corrupted version of Void Fiend's Trespass. This version of the ability is monumentally better than the uncorrupted version, because it doesn't have that weird upwards curve that the uncorrupted version has. It's genuinely a great movement ability that really feels good to use, and is really helpful for both chasing and running away from enemies, and it also keeps you invulnerable for the duration. What's not to like? 26th is Loader's superior secondary, the Spiked Fist. This ability is just objectively better than the Grapple Fist, for one reason. It allows her to have a ranged attack. Without this, you can't really kill anything that is farther away than melee range, and that's what makes it so good. 25 is Acrid's secondary, Neurotoxin, another case of a generally melee character having a ranged secondary that carries them through all of their runs. This ability is really strong, and it's ranked higher than the Spiked Fist since its range is much longer and it can also deal more damage. The 24th spot goes to Loader's passive, Scrap Barrier. On Loader, this ability is arguably weaker than it would be on a different character. Imagine this on someone with higher attack speed and range, like Commando. You would always have Barrier as long as you were shooting at something. This ability makes Aegis even less useful, and I love it for that. Number 23 is Huntress's Laser Glaive secondary, which is pretty strong. Other than Arrow Rain, Huntress doesn't have any other ability to deal with multiple enemies at once, so this helps her out a ton. The damage is great, it procs things very well, and the range isn't that bad either. The fact it goes through walls as well as makes this item all that much better, and it earns this place in the ranking. 22 is Engineer's Thermal Harpoons. Nothing much to say about this ability other than that it is easy to use, does pretty decent damage, and has a very forgiving cooldown. There is a nice aspect of this ability as well that makes it so that if the enemy you targeted with a harpoon dies before the harpoon gets to it, the harpoon will redirect to the nearest enemy, and I love that. 21 is Huntress's better primary, Flurry. I like how this ability interacts with your critical chance a lot, and its damage is nothing to scoff at. You will shred enemies with this in the late game, and it benefits from attack speed increasing items a lot more than Strafe can. Top 20 is already here, and it starts off with Bandit's final appearance on this ranking. His passive, Backstab, is the same case as Loader's passive, where it would be kind of ridiculous on some of the other survivors. Imagine getting full crit with Huntress just for being behind an enemy. It would honestly be too strong. Moving on to number 19, we have the second best primary in the game, Captain's Vulcan Shotgun. This primary is way too strong, but it makes sense, as Captain is held back by not having any movement abilities. He needs to be able to defend himself, as he can't really run away that well. It one-shots most squishies, and does a lot of damage to bosses. It would honestly be perfect if there were a way to swish it between the ranged and shotgun variants instead of charging it like you do now. 18th goes to Artificer's secondary, the Nano Spear. This ability is a bit too strong at points. It freezes enemies, allowing allowing you to easily execute them, and has no drop-off. Unfortunately, it can't hit multiple enemies, so for that reason, it's not getting any higher than 18th place. 17 is Acrid's far superior passive ability, Poison. This ability makes level 100 multitudes possible, as it does percentage of the enemy's maximum health instead of base damage. It shreds, and the only thing holding this back from being the number one ability in the game is that it cannot kill on its own, and only gets enemies down to 1 HP. Number 16 is Mercenary's first special ability, Eviscerate. I mean, come on. The damage, combined with the fact that you are invulnerable for the duration, come together to make a very strong ability. It's super helpful in the early game, killing most squishy enemies instantly and helping you with the stronger ones as well. It also doubles as a movement ability when not used offensively, and can even proc items. What's not to like? Number 15 is Artificer's final appearance on this list, and she leaves with the Charged Nanobomb. This ability is really good. The damage is insane, it does poke damage to any enemy near it, and it doesn't even take that long to charge. While the Nanospear's ability to freeze is nice, the Nanobomb can hit multiple enemies, and I think that's much more useful when comparing the damage values of each of them. 14 is Acrid's Caustic Leap. This ability is ridiculous. Amazing movement and damage combined make it so that you can chain kills together and punish enemies for being near each other. There isn't much to say here other than that this ability is incredibly strong and one of the best in the game. Unlucky number 13 is Huntress's Phase Blink. This ability feels like cheating. It allows you to dodge literally anything you want, and the short cooldown allows you to do that basically whenever you want. It's fast, has a short cooldown, and doesn't have the risk of being hit in the process, like something like Commando's Slide. It is the perfect movement ability. 12th is given to Heretic's Shadow Fade. This is actually one of the best movement abilities in the game, which is surprising, as it's on Heretic. Complete invulnerability, free flight, and amazing healing combine to make this incredibly useful when you need it. 11 is Captain's Hacking Beacon. This ability doesn't do damage, technically, doesn't protect you, and doesn't really help you that much once it's done its job, but what it does do is save you a ton of time. Instantly opening a legendary chest or making a Shrine of Chance completely free allows you to save precious time that could otherwise get you killed if the difficulty advancing catches you off guard. It isn't a small amount either. Sometimes a legendary chest can take multiple minutes to save up for in Risk of Rain 2, and multiple minutes can be incredibly precious. Breaking into the top 10, we have Multi's Retool ability. This ability wouldn't do anything on anyone else, and only works in conjunction with Multi's many primaries, but what it does do, that is incredibly useful, is allows you to carry 2 equipments. Being held back by the Trophy Hunter's Tricorn sucks if you can't find the boss you're looking for, but this ability allows you to completely bypass that by allowing you to just hold it in your back pocket until you need it. 9th is Acrid's Epidemic. This might have to be lowered in the ranking if we considered that this is kind of nothing without the poison passive ability, but with it, it becomes one of the best crowd control abilities in the game. Being able to spread a very strong debuff through a huge group of enemies is insanely strong at times, and that is why it has earned itself 9th place. 8 is Multi's Power Mode. I may be wrong for putting this above Retool, but I don't really care. I much prefer this to Retool, as I usually don't run anything but the nail guns. The added armor and the double attack speed allows you to absolutely shred most enemies, and I love that. Not much to say about it more than that though, so let's move on and get this video over with already. In 7th place is Mercenary's better utility, Focused Assault. Yes, it doesn't have as much range as the other option, but where it makes up for is the damage. 700% damage is no laughing matter, and it also reveals any enemies it doesn't kill, leading to even more damage later on. It's strange, I don't usually play Mercenary, as I don't love the feel of how he plays, but I keep ranking his abilities pretty high. Maybe I need to play him more. Number 6 is Captain's passive, Defensive Microbots. This is literally a legendary item, and it's a pretty good one at that. The ranged enemies in this game are honestly more scary than the melee range ones, so having the ability to completely protect yourself from like half the projectiles that come near you is way too strong. It also stacks with each drone you have, which just makes it that much stronger. Top 5 time, and we are starting with Huntress's Ballista. I mean, this is just the best ability for assassinating a particular enemy. 900% damage per shot is super strong, and it even gives you some verticality to boot. I secretly prefer arrow rain, but I think that's because Ballista feels like cheating. You just delete any enemy you want to, and severely hurt any enemy you don't kill. Fourth is Engineer's Stationary Turret. This one I actually don't have much to say about, because what more is there to say about it? It is literally 2 additional teammates and does ridiculous damage. At times, I will feel like turrets are the main character, and I'm just the deployable, because let's be real, there ain't much reason to play Engineer other than the turrets. Bronze medal is given to Loader's best ability, and no, I will not change my mind, the Thunder Gauntlet. This is the reason I play Loader regularly. Amazing damage and crowd control combined with the quick escape tool makes this ability one of the best, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Second place is earned by Mercenary's best and also most difficult to unlock ability, Slicing Winds. This ability is just a bundle of proc coefficient. Throwing this at an enemy while carrying an ATG missile launcher, a polyloot, or any other proccable item basically guarantees they will be deleted, and it's all without the downside of having to be near the enemies with Eviscerate. And first place, our final and best ability in the whole game of Risk of Rain 2 is Void Fiend's corrupted version of his primary ability, Corrupted Drown. This is the best primary ability in the game, and it is only held back by its range. The damage is insane, the proc coefficient is insane, the attack speed is also insane. It all belongs in an asylum with the amount of insanity built up in the right hand of our corrupted boy. Before we wrap up, I thought it would be interesting to count each ranking as if they were points and totaled them here. With a lower score being better, I found some interesting things like how Multi only lost to Loader by 1 point. I won't go into too much detail about the specific rankings, but some interesting things I wanted to bring up here were that Rex, Railgunner, and Commando didn't get into the top 30, and Rex didn't even make it into the top 50. Of course, these rankings were a bit skewed as Heretic only has 5 abilities, while some have 8 or more, and I found this a bit interesting. Huntress definitely makes sense being in first place, as she is my main, so not much of a surprise there. And finally, that's it. Did you disagree with my rankings? Did you agree? Be sure to let me know down in the comments down below. Also, if you have watched this far into the video, I have hidden a socks emote somewhere in the background footage of this video. The first person to find it and comment the timestamp of when it appears will get their comment pinned. Thanks so much for 4,000 subscribers. Not only is this more than I ever expected to get on YouTube, but it is also higher than I can count. It is really nice to know that 4,000 people want to listen to my dumb voice on the vast hellscape that is the internet, and I appreciate every single one of you. Thanks so much for watching the video all the way through, and if you did, and you aren't subscribed, why? Anyways, thank you to our members, Q3W3E3, Valento725, A Brief Gamer, Shadow Cheat, Supreme Firo, Soap, Eggy, Nia, and the _Radiance for supporting the channel like that. If you support the channel like they did, you can enjoy perks such as extra videos, early knowledge of videos, and a higher priority for challenges and other suggestions regarding the channel. If you don't want to support me with their money, that's always fine. You can always just like, subscribe, join the Discord, or check me out on Twitch. Other than that, I will see you later. Bye-bye.